Hey everybody, I just want to go over this week's assignment. The main assignment is to draw a couple of objects where one of which has the cylinder as the dominant form and the other box as the dominant form. You don't have to do rounded corners like this one. It makes it a little bit more difficult, but I wanted to do it in case some of you tried it. All right, so before you do that though, I want you to do your drawing calisthenics. So practice some boxes and cylinders. So just a quick review for the box forms. What I want you to do is pay attention to the parallel sides and keep them parallel, even in perspective. Identify the parallel lines. Make sure they're all playing on the same team. They're all going the same direction, or you can kick them in slightly so they'd converge eventually. But what you don't want to do is have them diverge, because that's going to be fighting against the form. Use a variety of angles to show. You could try doing some where you have more of the top or more of the side of the boxes, twist them around. Model could be helpful. Getting a small cardboard box or something can be useful. It's not totally necessary, but if you find yourself drawing the same angle over and over again, that can be pretty helpful to kind of shake it up a little bit. So before you do each of these boxes, just take a breath, commit to doing it perfect, even though I know it won't be. Take a look at for any simple adjustments and do them. Note if there's any patterns where you keep making mistakes over and over again and see if you can compensate for it, and then just do the next one. But don't agonize each one. It's better to just like kind of try to get into a flow, make a bunch of them, fill up a few pages of them, try to look for any patterns of mistakes, draw those boxes from a variety of angles. Cylinders and ellipses, a page of ellipses that I'm first drawing some guidelines that I'm going to put in between, and I'm going to draw the major axis of the ellipses and just try to keep the major axis, the minor axis of the ellipses sort of perpendicular to each other or square. Again, try to do a variety of ellipse angles and go quickly. So do a page of cylinders, draw a center line, choose an ellipse for each cylinder and try to maintain that same degree for the whole cylinder. Keep those ellipses balanced on the center line. You can try doing some like hourglass shapes. You can try doing them on their side. Just remember, if you're drawing a cylinder on its side, the ellipse minor axis is going to follow the center line of the cylinder. So if the cylinder is lying down, then the minor axis, the short part of the ellipse, is going to kind of go in the direction of the main cylinder. These videos obviously are sped up. Both the box video here and the ellipse and cylinder videos are each about 6 minutes long before I sped them up. Work quickly, but work thoughtfully. Just bust them out. You'll get better the more you do it. So go, go, go. Okay, so for the main assignment, I've got a little still life going on where I have my box object and my cylinder object next to each other. And the first step I'm going to do is I'm just going to try to block them out to kind of look at it instinctually, kind of figure out how big you want on the paper. If you draw it too small, don't think it's going to make it easier. Actually, drawing too small can be quite difficult because it doesn't give you any room to work. A quick aside, if you are working from a photograph like I am, be aware that cameras have their own distortion. They're great for capturing detail, but you need to think about how the lens distorts the image. So these are all photographs of the same cube that I took with my iPhone. So this is kind of a neutral view of it. But if you look at when I've taken it with the wide angle lens, it's a little out of focus, but you can see that it's really dramatic as far as the angles. You know that the height of all the sides are the same and the parallel sides are all going the same direction. But with this real forced perspective up close, you can see a dramatic sort of foreshortening of it. When I move over to the regular lens, not the wide angle on my phone, but still just have it really close, you can still see that it's got pretty dramatic foreshortening. So this is simulating something that's just like right in your face. So you've got that kind of exaggerated diminishing scale as it gets far away from you. Where if I pull the phone farther away from my object, that gets not as exaggerated. It's a little bit more consistent and it makes it a little bit easier to draw the way that I'm asking you to, where I'm trying to tell you to keep those lines parallel, the parallel lines on the object, parallel in perspective, maybe kicking in slightly, definitely never diverging unless there's a reason to do that. Okay, once I have kind of blocked it out, I'll start doing my measurements. I'll figure out ellipses I'm going to use. For here, what I've decided to do is choose my ellipse first and sort of use that as a unit of measurement. I'm trying to figure out where my ellipses are, and I'm using that ellipse that I've chosen to use as my measurement unit for the entire drawing. So I'm using it both for the space between the box object and the overall length of things and how high things are. When I'm doing my proportions, I want to kind of double check my proportions because this is all sort of estimation here, doing it freehand. So I'll measure it one way, but then I'll also look for alignments and try to like have two different methods of measuring before I decide on where my details are going to go. So just, double check, kind of triangulate your work. When I make a smaller ellipse, like on the top here, than the main ellipse on the bottom, I want to keep that ellipse degree the same. So I'll make it, as well as not quite as wide, when I'm shortening up the major axis, I'm also shortening up the minor axis a little bit, so it gets a little bit skinnier. So I'm going to make sure I have that center line on my cylinder object, trying to keep those ellipses balanced. You don't have to do rounded corners like I did here, but I wanted to show that so that if anybody did choose that, you could see how to approach it. So I kind of think of it like there's a little cylinder each corner. Draw lightly so you can erase your construction lines and then put in your details darker. This video was about 25 minutes before I sped it up, so I'm sure it'll take you longer because I've been doing this longer, but bust it out. You get better with time, you get better with doing it in a thoughtful way. So just kind of think of it like there's a little cylinder each corner, so you end up with two corner lines, on each side of that radius. And since we haven't studied shading yet, I'm not going to go too much into it, but it's really hard to show the radius corners on your object without having at least a little bit of shading there. So I'm going to put some in, but again, it's not really mandatory, but it's going to be hard to do if you pick an object that doesn't have a square corner. Don't do any text. You can put some lines there. You could indicate that there is text there, but the main thing I'm looking for is that you're kind of accurately depicting these forms in space. So you're keeping your ellipses centered on that center line, and you're trying to keep the ellipse degree the same throughout the object. You're trying to identify the parallel lines on your box object, and you're keeping them consistent even when it's in perspective. All right, look forward to seeing what you guys come up with.